Good morning, everyone. Today I am in Lycoming County, more specifically Muncy, Pennsylvania. And this behind me is the Muncy Historical Society, and we have a historical marker here. It was laid out in 1799 by Benjamin McCarty. And the town is named for the, looks to me as if it says Muncy Indians, a tribe of Delawares who inhabited the area before the arrival of the whites. So not 100% sure what we're gonna see, but anytime you visit one of these small towns that was established in the late 18th century or mid 18th century, you're gonna see some cool stuff. Always nice to explore these old homes. Now, I don't know what this was before it became the Historical Society. Got a little sundial here. You can visualize this was probably maybe a garden at one time. So this is a museum now, but it doesn't appear to be open. We have a nice old stone wall here. And we have a beeping horn, which is quite annoying. All right, so this home right over here, I believe is the oldest building in Muncy, and I believe it was built in 1800. I'm kind of thinking maybe somebody lives in it, because this is the museum. So I don't know, maybe somebody lives in there, so I don't think I'm gonna go peeking into windows. I don't know if it's part of the museum. I'm kind of thinking maybe it is, but I don't know for sure. So Muncy was settled by the McCarty brothers, Silas, William, Benjamin, and Isaac. And they moved here from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And I'm thinking back in 1787, this was the frontier. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot going on out here. So William and Benjamin McCarty, I believe, owned this land. They bought 300 acres of land originally owned by settler John Brady. And we're going to talk a little bit more about John Brady as we continue on with this video, because I think he's a pretty prominent historical figure in this area. All right, so you might notice Tony is with me today, and that's always a good thing because Tony always shares a lot of information. But these are kind of cool, Tone. This is where you would tie up your horse?
I think so.
So I definitely want to walk up this direction because I believe this is the center of town. But Tony mentioned that there's a park down this way, and it's John Brady Park. So I think we're going to check that out first, because as I mentioned before, John Brady was a pretty prominent historical figure of this town. So we'll check that out and see if there's anything of interest there. But before I leave, here's just a little historical marker or storyboard, so you can pause that if you would like to read it, but it talks about what we just mentioned. The McCarty house on your left, which is right over there, it was erected circa 1800 by William McCarty. And this picture just shows that there was a Dr. Edward Kitto, who was a dentist that moved into John McCarty's house. Look at those tools. God, I hate going to the dentist now. Could you imagine what it was like back in the early, like 1800s? Or even mid to late 1800s? All right, so we're walking down what almost appears to be an alleyway, but I guess it's a road, right?
It's Brady Road.
Oh, it's John Brady Road or Street. Right, okay, so I know I keep mentioning John Brady, and we'll get to his story. Just checking out some of these homes as we walk along towards John Brady Park.
That's 3 minutes walking.
All right, so
You have arrived.
according to GPS, this could be the spot, but there's no park here. This could be the park, and it's just not fixed up. So what I was looking for was Fort Brady, the site of Fort Brady, and according to GPS, there should be a Fort Brady Heritage Park, Tony? Yes. And so I don't know. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is where the fort was, but I have no idea. This looks like private property over here, so we're not going to go near that. So I'm going to continue down a little more because quite often if I don't turn around, I find something. So I don't know, guys. I don't know if this is where the fort was, but there does seem to be a trail here, Tony. This is probably it. This is a park. Yeah. Yeah, this is a park. So this, I believe, is the John Brady Heritage Park. And if you're still watching the video, you're probably wondering, who the heck is John Brady?
Well, it might not have anything to do.
All right, so John Brady, I guess, probably would have been, you know, the McCartys, I guess, settled here in 1787, but there was a fort here in 1776, and the fort was built by Major John Brady, a bouquet expedition veteran. Not sure what that is. But he built a fortified homestead called Fort Brady near Muncy to protect against Native American raids across the Susquehanna River. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research to see if this is the actual site, but I'm thinking this parcel of land has kind of been set aside as Heritage Park. And maybe if you continue down this trail, you would find something. But I'm not sure we're gonna do that today because there is a lot more we wanna see here first. And once again, I'm getting bit by mosquitoes. Bug spray, Jen. All right, there is Marti Alley. And I've already seen John Brady Road. So there's a lot named after the McCartys and John Brady. All right, so we're headed back into the historical part of town as I'm getting barked at again. So just a fun little fact, Tony. Muncy is the oldest township in Lycoming County. In fact, it's actually older than Lycoming County. Settlers, they started settling here in 1772. Checking out the sidewalk here. Slate. Now this appears to be concrete.
Yeah, that's concrete.
But over here we have the old. But over here we have the old slate sidewalks.
Yeah.
Thinking this is Victorian, right? Maybe. A lot of old homes. Beautiful old gate. Thomas Mast, manufactured, Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Excuse me as I just look at things. I just love old stuff like this. Maybe this was to tie your horse? These old towns just have so much character. Not like the cookie cutter homes you see being built in the modern era. Look at that old lantern. Yeah, there's another one of those poles. So I'm thinking, yeah, these are, and I think it's probably pretty obvious, right? These were put here. You would tie your horse up and then enter into your home or whoever you were visiting.
You must have, in order to close these, you gotta turn them. But they're just fake. They're fake.
You don't think these are original?
Oh, those might be.
These are probably original, but the shutters are
not
fake. Or at least we're thinking. But these, well, now what were these for?
I think you turned that.
Oh, it look, it still turns.
Yeah, and then you probably
So they would lock your shutters in place.
I think so.
I think so too. So as we pass by the McCarty homestead, once again, this area was absolutely on the frontier and often subject to violent clashes between settlers and Native Americans. So Tony read on one of the storyboards that this was so remote that people would shoot deer and bear right from their front. Or the McCartys would, at least. The early settlers, right, Tony? So they would be able to shoot bear and deer right from their front porch. So much cool history in Pennsylvania. Look at this tree, Tone.
That's a big tree.
What kind of tree is that? I didn't like how I asked Tony, but that is very cool.
That's an oak.
We believe this is an oak. So just getting back to the violent clashes between the settlers and the Native Americans, it kind of fostered in a cycle of raids and retaliations, shaping the lives of Brady's sons, which we may talk a little bit about them. This is a cool old house. Very ornate. They don't build things like that anymore, right? We've got the iron fence around the yard. All right, and here we have the Fort Brady Hotel and Restaurant. So this building, I believe, was built in 1810, but right here on this location, John Brady built a stockade during the French and Indian War. And we have an old movie theater over there, the Ritz. So I just want to get a little bit of a better view. I love old movie houses. So this was the Ritz. So it appears to be a CrossFit and a coffee shop now. The Ritz. So there is a little storyboard here, and it tells us that the Ritz opened in 1929 with its electric piano, and the first movie shown was The Queen of Sheba. I believe the movie The Queen of Sheba was one of the first, what they refer to as a talkie, a movie with sound, or with sound, right? Not a silent film. All right, so I'm crossing over the street, which is a very loud street. Supposedly there is an old opera house over here. All right, I found it. This was the old Opera House. In fact, there's still a sign on it. All right, so let's check out this old Opera House. Maybe we can see a date when it was built. All right, you can see the old signage right there. Mosley's Opera House. So I'm not sure when it was built, but I know it was prior to that movie theater we were just looking at. So probably the late 19th century, maybe. Tony's thinking about breakfast. Authentic Greek gyros. Gyros. But check this building out. This is an old bank. I'm always intrigued by old banks when I walk through a town. First Commonwealth Bank. The old Knight Depository. Think they still use that, Tony?
What?
The Knight Depository?
Maybe.
How did that work?
Pull that. Nope, it's locked.
It's locked.
You need a key.
So I gotta tell you, I walk through a lot of these small towns and I'm thinking Muncy is doing okay because tons of traffic. Now it is a Saturday morning and it's a little later than I usually like to get out on these town walks. It's about 11:30. The earlier you get out, the more you have the place to yourself, but we're gonna do the best we can with this. And this, do you think this is still a firehouse over here, Tony? I'm thinking this was a firehouse, right? Because you have that siren on the top. Doesn't appear to be a firehouse anymore. But I'm thinking at one time it was. I mean, they just don't build things like this before. And I don't know, were these wealthy people? Maybe yes, maybe no. But just so much detail, right? As I walk through this alley, I'm thinking these are probably rental properties now, so I want to kind of whisper. Very cool. Whoa, check this place out. Wow, so I saw pictures of this online. This is beautiful. So I'm gonna try to do a little quick research and find out what this was at one time, or maybe even what it is now. But look at this place. Maybe the wealthiest resident of Muncy lived here at one time. I don't know, but it's beautiful. All right, so I am now across the street and just look at that place. And we are lucky enough to have a storyboard that tells us a little bit about it. On the northwest corner of Main and High Street is what was once described as the most beautiful building in Pennsylvania. It was built in 1847. The Italianate stucco structure with eyebrow windows was home to the Lycoming County Fire Insurance Company, established in 1840. That is just a beautiful structure, isn't it? So this house caught my eye. God, that's beautiful. So many beautiful homes in this part of Pennsylvania. So there must have been a lot of money here at one time. Maybe the timber industry. Love these old lights. Look at this. Just some beautiful homes. And I'm trying to be respectful because these look like museums, but people are living in these homes. But look at that old stone house. I mean, that's just gorgeous, right? I love it. Muncy is a beautiful little town. Look at that beautiful church. So we are gonna cross the street and check that out. See if we can find maybe a cornerstone with the year on it. Just gonna have to excuse the traffic noise. This is a busy street, but check this church out. Love these old churches. This is St. Andrew Lutheran Church. Now, whether it was always a Lutheran church, I don't know. Quite often in these towns, the buildings are still there, but there's a new church in there. So up there, do you think that was the bell tower maybe at the top? I'm kind of thinking yes. All right, so here's the cornerstone, Muncy Evangelical Lutheran Church. 1853 to 1905, which tells me most likely it was built in 1905, but there was maybe a church here prior to that. Maybe just a wooden church. And right down the road, we have another beautiful church. Again, another beautiful old church. And this one is actually on the National Historic Registry. We're lucky enough to have a little storyboard here. St. James is one of the most studied Gothic revival churches, and it's listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. So it says the church was erected in 1832, and the original house of worship was dismantled in 1856. So that would tell me this was built in 1856. But the original bricks were reused in the quaint building to the rear of the new church, which is still in use today as a meeting house or meeting room. So let's just get a closer look at this beautiful church. Look at that door. The doors were always red, and I'm not sure why that is. I think there probably is a reason for that, so I might look that up and put something on the video. But this is beautiful. So I'm gonna head back and see if we can find that brick structure that they were referring to. And there it is. So the bricks used to build this were from the original church. And then this was built in 1856, I believe it said. So the town was officially founded in 1797 by Benjamin McCarty. He laid out the town, lots along what is now Main Street, which is where we are walking right now. And another interesting fact, it was not named Muncy originally, it was Pennsboro. In 1826, after the slow growth of Pennsboro, it was incorporated as a borough in 1826. And it was renamed Muncy in, what year, Tony? 1827, that's when they named it Muncy.
More houses.
Just continuing to walk along Main Street.
Yeah, a lot of houses.
Small town America, right, Tony?
Yep.
There's a story in every town. And here we have the Muncy Public Library. And they appear to be open. It is such a hot day today, and I can feel the air conditioner coming out. It's supposed to go up to like 95 today. All right, so let me catch back up with Tony and see what else we can find. All right, so I made my way over to the Muncy Cemetery. I wanted to check out the John Brady Memorial. So I believe this is it right here. All right, so there it is, John Brady, it says 1779 up here, 1879 down here. Dedicated October 15th, 1879 to Captain John Brady, defender of Muncy settlement, killed by Indians April, it looks like it says, I don't know, April 17th, 1779. Okay, April 11th, 1779. All right, so I'm not sure why it says 1779. Tony's telling me that that's when he died, which is quite possibly correct because this was supposedly dedicated 100 years after he died. But I guess from what I was reading online, it says that he died on August 7th, 1778 during a grain harvest protection mission. And Native American attackers appeared and James was shot and scalped. All right, so right here, John Brady, a soldier of the Revolution who fell at Wolf Run, April 11th, 1779. So I'm gonna say that the monument is correct. He was 46 years old, and my research on the internet is a year off or incorrect, because from what I was reading, it said the attack happened on August 7th, 1778. So we'll go with 1779. So often with history that goes back over a couple hundred years, sometimes the dates and some of the information gets a little bit mixed up. And then on the other side, I was just asking Tony if he thinks his family was buried here, and I don't know. I don't think so, but I guess his wife was Mary Quigley, and then this lists his children: William, Hannah, Samuel, Liberty, Robert, Mary, James, Jane, John, and Hugh. There's always a lot of history if you find the oldest cemetery in any of these towns or boroughs. Okay, so I am no longer in Muncy. I'm actually in Loyalsock, Pennsylvania, which is maybe like a 15-20 minute drive from Muncy. And the reason we are here, I believe this is the location where Brady was attacked. And I've been to this little park before. I think it's called Canfield Island. I don't believe it's an actual island, but anyway, back to the story. So I was here before and I did some running along this trail, and I remember seeing a historical marker. So I believe this is probably where the attack happened. So anyway, I'm gonna see if I can find that marker. All right, so Tony's just explaining this is why it's called an island. I guess this creek, right? This is just a little stream or creek.
It's actually the Susquehanna River just cut in and back out. That's part of the river.
This is part of the river?
Yeah, that's why it's an island. It goes in and out.
But this, do you think this is part of the river or the creek?
No, it's part of the river.
All right, so this is part of the river, and that makes this
An island.
an island.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. You are here. So yes, Canfield Island is technically an island. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program. Let's see if we can find that historical marker. So just a little more history of Muncy. By the 1840s, Muncy had a notable Quaker population, including Enos Hawley, who was a prominent abolitionist and a tanner who obviously opposed slavery, but the region was quite divided on the issue. And in 1842, there was a speech held in Muncy by an anti-slavery speaker at a local school, and it incited a violent mob attack. Hawley and the speaker were both injured, and the mob later assaulted Hawley's home. 13 of the 18 rioters were found guilty after persistent efforts by juror Abraham Updegraff. No, there's a name. A German-speaking abolitionist involved in the Underground Railroad. So many interesting people anytime I do one of these videos. Now I kind of want to know a little bit more about him. But despite the convictions, Governor David R. Porter pardoned the rioters, claiming the trial was politically motivated. His action was widely criticized and earned him the nickname Previous Pardoning Porter. Trials being politicized. That's not something that happens anymore, right? You know, the more you read about history, the more it happens over and over and over again. If my memory serves me correct, the historical marker is up on this. I don't know if it's a historical marker or just on this storyboard. All right, Tony is here. The murder of James Brady, 1778.
Yeah, and John Brady is 1770.
So I might have to scrap a lot of this video, either that or I'm gonna put it up there anyway, because I've been saying John Brady the whole time. Now, I don't know if these are two different people or if... Anyway, let's read about James Brady. Oh, so James Brady is the son of Captain John Brady. So anyway, I'll be putting a lot of notes on this video. All right, so this is a very interesting storyboard here. So I'm gonna hold it over and you can pause and read if you like, but I think I'm pretty much going to read it to you anyway. During the Revolutionary War, Allied Native American tribes attacked settlers in this region, seeking to destroy food supplies and divert the Continental Army from actions to the south. And in July 1778, the Wyoming Massacre on the North Branch and an onslaught of Native American attacks caused the evacuation of the West Branch Valley. As in early August 21st, 21-year-old James Brady, son of Captain John Brady, left for Fort Augusta with a group and returned to this site to harvest ripened grain that had escaped destruction. And on August 8th, the group divided in two. The reapers, except for Brady, leaned their guns around a tree about an hour after sunrise under the cover of fog. A war party attacked. Before Brady could reach his gun, he was shot, speared, tomahawked, and scalped. Despite this, he rose and made his way to a nearby house. And he died on August 13th. Brady regained his reason and described in great detail the events he had witnessed. So what we just read explains a lot because I was talking about two different people. James is John's son, who was killed in an Indian attack. And Tony was just telling me that John Brady was also killed in an Indian attack. Is that right, Tony? And Tony just looked up a historical marker. Captain John Brady, the famed Indian fighter and hero of the colonial wars and the Revolution, was killed in an ambush by Indians near April 11th, 1779. So it was correct when we read it on the monument.
Right.
So in this video, you got some history about John and James, and I kind of combined them into one person. So hopefully when I edit this, through my notes, I'll be able to clarify a little bit. So somewhere near the old Lycoming Mall is where Captain John Brady is buried.
So somewhere between Pensdale and Muncy.
So somewhere between Pensdale and Muncy, there is a grave marker for Captain John Brady. We are not going to get there today.
We already did
As
that.
far as James Brady, they don't know exactly where he's buried. They believe it was somewhere in Sunbury, where I believe after the attack, he wound up back at his mom's house, where he, I guess, passed away from his wounds. Very sad, very complicated history, you know? So the attack on James Brady, I want to make sure I get it right, by the Native Americans was related to the Revolutionary War. And the Native Americans were fighting on the side of the British. All right, so I think I'm going to end my video here. Sorry about the confusion. I pretty much confused John and James, father and son, throughout most of this video, but hopefully in my editing, I was able to clarify some of that through the notes. But if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much. You have an awesome weekend, everybody. Take care.